This little switch drives me crazy. Believe it or not, it holds the power of the multiverse. In this case, it controls which universe the music that fills the room comes from. Now, why am I being so dramatic? Well, when I listen to this album tonight, Led Zeppelin's Presence, do I want to step into the Ultralinear zone or the Triode zone? Now, if you have an amp that switches between Triode and Ultralinear modes, you know what I'm talking about. And it can drive you crazy, or at least for me, it can drive me crazy trying to figure out, which mode do I want to listen in? And I've tried them both. I flip-flop back and forth all the time. So let's dive into the insanity. Now, I'm not going to get into, super technical things that regarding Ultralinear and Triode. I do have to touch on it though, but I'm going to try to focus more on the sound. These are KT77s, actually Goldline KT77s. They can be swapped out for EL34. If you have an amp that takes EL34s, you can swap KT77s in. Most of the time, I would check with the manufacturer. But these tubes, I do want to say, came from Viva Tubes. Now, this is going to sound like an ad, and I guess it kind of is, because I can't say enough good things about Viva Tubes. I've had a recent experience with them, great customer service, and for me, customer service is what makes or breaks a company. They're just a small company, and they started selling vintage vacuum tubes and also gear on eBay back in, I think, 2007. And they grew into New England's largest and, as far as I know, only tube-centric parts store. And they ship worldwide. They have local pickup, and they pretty much have all the major brands that produce tubes, both new old stock and modern tubes. They also hand test and match nearly every single tube model that they carry in-house. And they cover all the different types of functional defects that might happen in a tube. They check for that. And they're so easy to deal with. They're vintage tubes, they have a 30-day warranty on. If it's a new production tube, I believe they extend that to 90 days. And Pavane tubes are a year warranty. I mean, that's something you really can't beat. I mean, that's great. I didn't want to fail to mention them because of my recent experience with these KT77s. They are kind of the sweet spot between EL34s and KT88s. Now, these are new production, so they're not the classic Genelex Goldline tubes. I mean, they're a new production tube. But they have a nice lush mid-range, and their sounds, the highs are not too bright. They do roll off a bit, but not in a way that takes away from the music. It's a nice smooth roll off, which is what you want from, say, an EL34 tube, which this is close to. Now, what I just described, clear highs that aren't too bright, nice lush mid-range, a nice listening experience. That's what Triode mode brings to the table. With Triode mode, you get that, that soft warmth, and I would say romantic. And who doesn't like romantic? It pulls you in. It all has to do with how the screen grid and the power tube is handled by the amp. Now, I know I said I wasn't going to get too technical, but I kind of have to. I'm only going to do it for about maybe a minute and a half. You can even time me. Now you see these pins? These pins are connected to different elements in the tube itself. Pin 4 is connected to the screen grid, and depending on which pin is engaged and what part of the tube is engaged will dictate how it's performed, and the amplifier handles that. Now in Triode mode, the screen grid is connected, or the screen grid pin is connected to the plate pin. That will make the sound, well, you'll get less output. So you're going to get less power in Triode mode. It kind of turns this into a triode. And also, you do get less power, but you also get a little bit more mid-range. You get that lushness that you hear about with, say, EL34s. That's what a Triode mode brings to the table. And it all has to do with how these pins are connected. In Ultralinear mode, that's different. The screen grid pin is connected to a tap on the transformer, which gives you more power, a more dynamic sound, one that's a little bit punchier. Now, I'm not an electrician or an engineer, so some of what I say, just know it's coming from very high level. I don't understand all of it and how it works, but I like to understand at least enough. So when I hear a sound that I like, and like say with Triode, I'd like to understand why. What is it about that sound that moves me? Now, I do want to point something out, and this is a bit of terminology which sometimes confuses folks, and it did confuse me in the very beginning, and that's ultralinear and linear. They are different. They're talking about two different things. When you're talking about, if somebody says, I want to build a linear system, they're talking about a system that has a flat response, meaning that the highs and the lows are allowed to express themselves naturally. They're not being changed in any way. So it's as linear as it can get. They're not being recessed or boosted. You can sum it up as what goes in is what comes out. Now, if you played a track through a perfectly linear system, you're going to get a sound that's close to how it was recorded. There's going to be no coloration. There's going to be, no added warmth or sparkle. It's going to be neutral and balanced. Nothing is hyped or dulled. And that's linear. It has nothing to do with tubes directly. Ultralinear is something completely different and has everything to do with tubes. Now, it doesn't have to be part of a linear system, but it very well can be. Triode mode, on the other hand, is not linear in any way, shape, or form. Now, ultralinear in tube amplifiers isn't about delivering a neutral sound in the way that we just talked about with a linear system. It's more about the circuit design. It's about how those output tubes are connected and controlled by the system. Now, the term ultralinear has been around for quite a long time. It was first coined in 1950 by Alan Blumlein. He wanted to design a circuit with less distortion across a wider frequency range by tapping into that transformer at, I guess, a magic sweet spot. He called it ultralinear, but it's a linearity of behavior, or maybe a linearity of design as opposed to sound. Now, Alan Blumlein wasn't just the ultralinear guy. He also had 128 patents. And when you talk about stereo sound, he was one of the original guys that developed stereo sound. And sadly, he died testing, I think, radar equipment on a plane during World War II. So as tragic as that is, a bigger tragedy is, what else would he have designed, had he lived? Now, I struggled with what made triode mode different than ultralinear mode for a long time. And I ended up making a chart to help me understand it better. So I'll show that right here. Now, as you might expect with all things audio, it's a matter of preference. I tend to lean towards triode mode. I find it a little bit more holographic. It does depend on the tubes, but I do find it more holographic. My friend Arik, the genius behind the Transcend amp, I believe that he prefers ultralinear with a healthy dose of negative feedback. I'm going to stay away from what negative feedback is. That's an entirely different topic, and one that I'm also trying to completely wrap my head around before I try to talk about it. So if you're wondering which mode is right, well, there isn't a right. It all depends on the music you're listening to and really how you feel at the moment, or what you're going for. What type of sound are you going for? What type of feeling are you going for? And if you've got an amp that gives you both options, flick that switch every once in a while. Test out triode, test out ultralinear, and see which mode brings you the most pleasure. See which one turns you on. It's almost like living with an amp that has two personalities. Between the two, you have triode, which is almost like an intimate jazz club, and then ultralinear, which is a little bit like a concert hall. Both are amazing experiences, just with different presentations. And of course, once you start switching between the two modes, that's when you end up wanting to test different tubes to see how that affects the presentation. And that, my friends, is a rabbit hole that leads you to having a bunch of tubes and explaining to your significant other why you just need one more set. And that's about it. And if you enjoyed any of the information I presented today, please like and subscribe to the show. I also have a newsletter, comes out weekly on Saturday mornings, that you might enjoy. There's a few hundred subscribers now, and it's a lot of fun. I enjoy putting that out. So until next time, take care of yourself, enjoy your records, and I'll see you soon.